And so, we always say we take students and we make them professionals who understand the process, understand the trays, understand the why. And hopefully by doing that, I encourage them to be curious as well. There are so many different ways to do the exact same thing. And as long as the outcome is the same, as long as the outcome is safe, be curious about it. Ask your leader, ask your mentor, hey, why did you take that approach? Can you teach me? Because chances are you're going to learn something too.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
All right, Clean Freaks, you're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast. My name is Bobby Parker. I'm your host, and joining me as co-host for season 33 is Jason Minatillo. Jason, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me, Bobby. Looking forward to working with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this season we're titling Built Different, and it's all about training, competencies, education. And today's episode, we're taking a look at a training model that not a lot of folks get the opportunity to go through, and that is collegiate level SPD programs. Now, Jason, out here in Kentucky, at least when I was managing, there weren't any collegiate level programs around. So everybody that I hired as an SPD manager was somebody who either came from another facility or had never had to spell the letters OR before, just like brand new to healthcare. But I know that's not everybody's experience. There's a lot of folks who have the majority of folks in the market are coming through this collegiate program. So looking forward to talking through what that looks like and, the advantages of those kinds of programs.
Agree. Like I said, I'm used to coming from and hiring those people coming from other facilities, or hiring brand new, no experience, and growing my own. So excited to hear about this collegiate program and hearing that they are starting to take hold in several states, but very, very still slim amount of exposure.
Well, if you're curious then about sterile processing programs at the collegiate level, we've got the right guest for you today. Joining us right after this break is going to be a sterile processing coordinator at a technical college for a sterile processing program. So join us right after this quick break to hear from Veronica Martinez.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
And joining us now in studio is Veronica Martinez, Sterile Processing Program Coordinator at Mountainland Technical College in Lehi, Utah. Veronica, welcome to the show. So glad to have you on here with us in studio.
Thanks, Bobby. I'm so excited to be here. It's awesome. I feel like I'm fangirling right now. Beyond Clean is something that I listen to regularly. It's something I have my students listen to. And so being a part of this is a true honor.
Well, we love to hear that. Getting you on the show was important to us. We had chatted a little bit about higher education in sterile processing, and this season's all about training sterile processing technicians, and that kind of collegiate level education for sterile processing isn't a topic we spent a lot of time talking about on Beyond Clean, and so excited to get into that. But before we do, would you mind to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and what you've been doing in the sterile processing industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a self-proclaimed science nerd. I really love understanding the why behind things. and I tend to go down rabbit holes until I fully understand them. So I'm a lifelong learner at heart. Academia background, I have a background in microbiology and biotechnology, a little bit of chem in there as well. I'm super passionate about research and hands-on work, lab skills, and I enjoy teaching and sharing knowledge just as much. Alongside that, I hold a couple of certifications through HSPA, and I currently serve as their subject matter expert. Last year, I had the privilege of helping write the CRCST exam, and I also serve on their educational advisory committee. So those are super important to me. I love sharing both industry standards and educational pathways. As far as how I came to SPD, my role in sterile processing, as you said, is overseeing the curriculum development, student education, clinical partnerships, and workforce preparation at Mountainland Technical College. I help students build the foundation for critical thinking and what they need to succeed, grow as a whole in healthcare. And I always tell them that my goal in teaching really is to give them a baseline of everything I know, have them start from there, and then come back and teach me. Tell me what you have learned since then, and ultimately, hopefully we can advance our profession and improve patient care.
Well, I promised at the intro that we've got the right person here to talk to us about collegiate level programs, and I think that bio certainly fulfills that promise. Veronica, before we keep rolling, I'm curious, how does somebody with a chemistry and microbiology background and an interest in science end up doing what you do? How did you find sterile processing?
Yeah, this is actually a super funny story. I wanted to go into med school, and I knew for med school that I needed to have experience of clinical hours, shadowing, and whatnot. And so I said, well, time to get a job at a hospital. And when I was looking for jobs at a hospital, I tell my students this story too. I found a position that talked about inputting material and reorganizing it, structuring it, scheduling, and then re-outputting. And to me, it sounded like a desk job. And what it was describing was sterile processing being the heart of this hospital. And I applied for the position expecting to be over surgery scheduling, and somehow found myself in the middle of surgery. So.
Yeah, you're like, what do I need this Deacon Tam gown for? I thought I was scheduling surgery. So
yeah. Nobody really grows up saying I want to work in sterile processing, but once you understand it and realize it, it's one of the most critical jobs that the hospital has, and nobody really sees it.
Yeah, it's easy to fall in love with. And I love asking that question because almost nobody finds SPD on purpose. It kind of finds us in its own way.
It's a calling.
That's right. But yeah, once you fall in love with it, it's hard to do something else. Well, Veronica, we want to hear more about your experience in sterile processing collegiate program. So here at the top of the call, why don't we start at the level of definitions? Could you define for us what an SPD collegiate program is and give us a picture of what does it look like? What kinds of things are they learning? How long does it take to get through one? Yeah, what is collegiate SPD 101 for us here?
Yeah, so SPD collegiate programs can look really different across the country. So I can really only speak to our model at MTech. One of the reasons that I'm really passionate about collegiate education is it provides a much more comprehensive learning experience than simply just asking someone to complete tasks. So our program teaches everything in SPD in about 6 to 9 months. And during that time, students learn the science and the theory behind sterilizing, like microbiology, infection prevention. You mentioned decontam, sterilization, anatomy, medical terminology, etc. So we kind of go into the outline that sterile processing is and teach all of those tasks, both in the classroom and in our lab. We have a lab that closely mirrors what students would find in a hospital setting. And that kind of helps them build confidence, build critical thinking skills, work in what we call, the most intense part, but in a really low stakes opportunity.
That's awesome, Veronica. Actually, your background's very similar to my upbringing as well in the SPD world. So pre-med and then went the other direction. So we'll have to talk further. Pretty cool. So what are some of the advantages?
Dark side.
That's right. Welcome to the dark side. I actually consider it the light side.
Okay.
But with that being said, what are some advantages of having a collegiate program versus a standard, we'll say a standard process of, again, you said task orientation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think on-the-job training is often focused with teaching someone how to perform tasks required for a specific department. The experience is valuable, but it can also be limited by time, staffing, immediate needs from the department. So sometimes I refer to my students when I'm teaching a lesson as like real world and like book world, And so in the book world, I can give you a perfect example, but real world, it's going to be a little bit different. So I think with the collegiate experience, you get to kind of overcome some of both sides and overcome some of the learning gaps that happen in the real world. Sometimes you have Sue, who's been working in the field for 20 years and has been doing it the whole time just because that's how she was taught. And somewhere along the way, you missed a critical step. Or you're trained by Bob, who's been taught by someone else, but has little to formal education in sterility. So that's how mistakes and I feel like shortcuts and misconceptions are unintentionally passed along. But with collegiate education, we get to slow everything down, talk to you personally, explain the why, and make sure that you are following policy.
So you're basically removing the telephone game is what you're trying to do. That's pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah, removing the telephone and then giving a more in-depth understanding on specific topics.
Veronica, one of my favorite things about hiring new employees who were going through the certification manual is they would highlight those things, say, hey, I'm studying for my certification and it's, there's this book knowledge, there's this thing it says, and I noticed that we're doing something different. Like, why is that? And that can be a challenge for operational leaders. But it also, it's a good opportunity to have somebody come in with fresh eyes, who's been trained according to the standards, who can really start to notice some of that dissonance, like that we're not maybe doing things up to standards in the department, and really challenge departments to be better. And so I'm wondering though, as collegiate level trainees and students are getting this book knowledge in the classroom and working in a lab, which, by the way, that sounds super cool. I want to ask you about the lab as well. How do they not have this whiplash experience coming out of school and going into a department and experiencing maybe some processes that don't line up with what they've been learning for the last 9 months, and don't put themselves in the situation where they come in with the puffed up chest and say, well, my teacher said, how do you navigate that transition from school into the workplace?
Bobby, if I had $1 or a penny for every time that has happened in my career, I would be able to retire at my young age. That is extremely common, and it is a huge challenge that we are trying to overcome. I think on-the-job training teaches a technician how to do the work, but what I try and do is teach them how to think through the work. And so, we always say we take students and we make them professionals who understand the process, understand the trays, understand the why, and hopefully, by doing that, I encourage them to be curious as well. There are so many different ways to do the exact same thing. And as long as the outcome is the same, as long as the outcome is safe, be curious about it. Ask your leader, ask your mentor, hey, why did you take that approach? Can you teach me? Because chances are you're going to learn something too.
Yeah. I mean, that's good advice for all of us, right? Whenever we encounter something, to start from a level of curiosity and say, could you tell me more about that, and really try to understand before you confront it. But what's confusing for those new employees though is it's hard at that stage of experience to sort out which of these differences are ones that are just, difference in preference, and there's a lot of ways to do it, and which ones are truly a critical patient safety issue. Because sometimes differences are a non-negotiable and a patient safety issue. It's hard to sort out the difference between them.
It definitely is. And I think the really great thing about teaching these students is they can become the next generation. They can become the students that approach it with curiosity, but back it up with standards.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We usually tell people brand new coming in, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make them drink. I can lead you to knowledge, but I can't make you think. So start with asking those questions, those whys, with with an open mind, so an open curiosity. So I think that's fantastic. With that being said, you just alluded to I'm assuming when you're placing those students into programs, you've vetted those programs or those departments that are coming in. Is there a process around that? How do you improve that? I'm just curious because, like I said, you're going to have good departments. You're going to have those departments that are struggling. And how do you make sure that your students are, again, seeing best practice and then employing that best practice when they leave your program?
Yeah, we have really strong partners with all of our clinicals, and I think communication is going to be key. And so we host meetings annually with all of our partners and all of their management teams to ensure that we're both on the same page. We want to make sure what we are teaching our students is up to par with current standards. And we want to also make sure that our students are feeling comfortable and supported by their mentors. And so we check in on both. I visit nearly every hospital in Utah. If you haven't seen my name in an email, you've seen me in person. And so I really try and make that relationship a close bond.
That's awesome.
So you have clinicals with partnerships so that students can get some on-the-job experience during that 6 to 9 months, it sounds like. And then there's also a lab where you can do some instruction in the classroom. Just because I'm curious, what does that lab look like? What kind of tools and toys do you get to employ in there?
Yeah, so it's one of our greatest pride and joys. We are so thrilled to have it. It is essentially a giant classroom that has been turned into an SPD. And so every area of this classroom has been built and modified to replicate what you would go to see at your work and at your clinic and at your hospital. So we have the sinks in there. We have our irrigating and non-irrigating ultrasonics. We have all of our assembly workstations. We have our sterile storage. We have our scope cabinets. We have case carts. Some of the areas are donated from our awesome clinical partners that perhaps they got a newer version of them. And a lot of them are just exactly the ones that you would find that you are saving for your own department, for your next budget. So we really try and replicate it to be as identical as possible.
That donation piece is an important one as well. I'm not sure about your facility in particular, but there was a school that was not terribly far from where I was leading that was often looking for more instruments, and they were okay with some that weren't quite surgery ready. In fact, it also helped with inspection techniques, like here's what damage on an instrument looks like. And so they asked if we had any non-repairables that we were going to throw out. They wanted us to donate them to them just so that they could build up their surgical instruments and have some on hand to be able to identify, like, what does an over-sharpened scissor look like, or what does pitting look like, and then just have some more instruments for identifying the difference between ring handles and shafts and hinges and distal tips and proximal ends and things like that. And so, helpful call out there for folks that maybe don't know what to do with their instruments that can't be used in service anymore. You might reach out to a local program and find out if they have a use for them.
Yeah, we would absolutely take them. I think it really enhances the program. Like you said, you get all this exposure in which perhaps in a real world setting, you only get that one at a time.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked a little bit about the advantages of going through this training program and being, working through some certificate material, and weighed that against on-the-job training. Veronica, I imagine there will be some skeptics out there who are saying, well, that's not a fair comparison, saying, collegiate level education versus on-the-job training with Sue, who's been there for 20 years. So what about like the technicians who are coming into maybe a level 1 trauma center, they've got a dedicated educator, and they're just walking people through a certificate program, preparing them to take an exam with HSPA or CBSPD. Are there any advantages or disadvantages to the collegiate program as compared to maybe starting fresh in a department more like that one?
Absolutely. As much as I believe in collegiate education, I also recognize that there are things that a classroom simply can't replicate. No matter how advanced a lab is, it just can't recreate that space and pressure or unpredictability that a busy SPD really has. So, in the lab, we try and replicate it as much as possible. We have instrument failures, we have equipment failures, we have add-ons. We even pair up with our surge tech department, and we try to create mock scenarios where students are faced with challenges and trying to overcome those, but it doesn't quite match up what you might feel when you're there. And so I think every facility has its own culture and workflows, expectations that the student's going to navigate, whether you're in a trauma 1 or a trauma 4. So I don't necessarily see the education as competing approaches with the clinical partners. I see them as partners in itself. So the goal is to graduate someone who understands enough that they can ask the right questions, that they can seek evidence-based answers, and they can continue learning in their career. So in many ways, I feel like it's important that we teach students not what to think, but how to think.
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate that. And you said that statement of, I'm not in competition with the current program or the process that we just kind of alluded to. It's actually an addition to or an add. I appreciate that, because I think oftentimes we kind of get stuck into, well, we have to go down this one pathway and it's going to take this amount of time. Whereas, actually we could, supplement with 2 different programs and get double the techs. SPD doesn't grow on trees. And so it's hard to find those people, right? So what better way than to just not only grow them internally, but also let's use the resources that are out there in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a two-way street. We learn from you and you learn from me. It's something that we can do together. And I have had open houses where some of our clinical partners have come and said, hey, I've had people join my team recently that could really benefit from this. If you are still in SPD and you are doing your job, can you still take this class? And my answer is absolutely. Like you said, it's an add-on.
Right. So I only have experience with these kinds of programs here in Kentucky. And as of 2026, there aren't a lot of them out in this part of the country. I'm curious from your all's perspective, like how big of a thing is collegiate level SPD programs out there in the Midwest and West? And how are employers viewing these collegiate program graduates? Like, do you think that collegiate program graduates are getting a leg up in the job market? And, how necessary of a thing is it for folks considering this as a career field?
I think it's not as common as maybe we want it to be. And I think the quality can differ as well. A lot of times I hear frustrations where, oh yeah, you can join this program, but perhaps it'll only be the book work and they don't fully extend into the clinical opportunities. So really proud to say, we do both here.
So here in Kentucky, I've got a little bit of limited exposure to collegiate level programs. There's not a lot of them out here. And then I'm curious for you all, because you've got, a different pond that you're swimming in out there in Utah, and kind of what's going on in the West and Midwest. How common are these collegiate level programs, and what kind of advantages do you think that the students have in the marketplace in terms of landing a job and starting a successful career, as opposed to, just getting started on their own?
Yeah, I don't think that they're as common as maybe we want them to be. A lot of times you hear different qualities, and so you can kind of stray people away even if the opportunity is there. But what I hear most from our clinical partners is the value that these students have to develop and have the opportunities before employment even happens. So our clinical partners have said that they have students that they really don't think have much of a training period. The training period coming in is going to be drastically different if you're off the street versus if you've been practicing this with instructors for 6 to 9 months. So that's a huge advantage that we have. But we also really teach the professionalism and the development of the students as well. So that way, when you go into an SPD, no matter what level, you're able to think through problems that you might see differently approached in real life, and you're able to do it professionally as well.
Yeah. Veronica, the more we talk, the more questions that I have about this. This is a really interesting topic. So collegiate level programs. Yeah, no, all good, all good. So you mentioned some differences in quality. I imagine not every program is created equal, right?
Right.
I'm curious from an accreditation standpoint, like what's required for you to offer this kind of program as opposed to somebody who did SPD once 7 years ago and decides I'm going to start an online program myself and put some modules out there on the internet? Because I imagine those kinds of things also exist in the space. So like what kind of controls and accreditations do you all have to work through?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's honestly something that I'm super proud of working at Mountainland Technical College. And so not only do we have really awesome partnerships with hospitals all over Utah, but we also have really awesome partnerships with our local universities too. So in our program, you leave with all of the resources and more to understand the tasks at hand for SPD on both the surface and the deep level, because we have the time. We can dig in. We can dig through those rabbit holes. We can do whatever you need to completely understand it. And then once you are at a certain point in the program, we put you in clinicals. And so a lot of times our students are in class from 7:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. And then they go off to their clinicals for another 5 to 8 hour shift. And that's every single day. So you are knee deep in SPD for like a year before you're ever immersed as a certified technician. And so they are ready. They are going. And then we always say, hey, use SPD for whatever you need. Do you need it in the moment, or do you need it for a stepping stone, or do you need it for a lifelong career, right? All of them are the right answer. You can do whatever SPD can serve you with. And so we offer credits to transfer to our local colleges to gain an associate's and or bachelor's degree on top of the education that you got at this college.
Super cool. That's the stepping stone piece I think I was trying to connect in my mind of like connecting this to those professional degrees or those associate's degrees. That's really cool.
It's awesome. And I'm super thankful for it. We have so many different degrees that you can pivot into, and that's going to help you with leadership. That's going to help you with your resume. That's going to help you with any point that you want to pivot later in life. So we like to say that we are affordable. 99% of our graduates are debt-free. So that's also a really impressive thing, because I've heard so many different programs say, well, it's expensive and, they don't give you the clinical hours, or I don't really know where to go from here. And we kind of just take care of all that for you.
Veronica, you just took one of my questions out of my mouth, because, again, that's one of those cost things that come into play with going into SPD. To that point, there are programs that are, significant money for just a certification, and that doesn't make sense for somebody coming in to not have anything else beyond that. Again, certification sounds like, again, you've got a, associate's program along with all of those pieces. So, how do you encourage your graduated techs then to look into growing themselves beyond that? Again, you've talked about having them being lifelong learners. What's those next phases? You already alluded to, like, hey, you can bring those program or that associates back to your college for other processes. How do you continue that progression?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in the classroom, we have students that learn a little bit quicker, and we have students that need a little bit more in-depth explanations. And one of our classroom management skills that we try and have our instructors do is, if you have a student that is learning a little bit quicker, teach them how to approach something as a manager. Teach them how to approach something as a leader, to teach back to your other students. And I think in that mindset, you're going to need some more education, and you're going to need some more resources. If you want to tap into being able to lead, being able to direct, being able to really understand the why, then progressing yourself in any way possible is really going to give you that leg up.
Yeah, for sure. And Veronica, so many of the sterile processing leadership job descriptions these days are starting to require bachelor's degrees or associate's degrees. And so having that connection and that support and encouragement to, while you're working as a technician, pursue some additional higher education really does open some real doors down the line in the career path. we are running short on time. Veronica, this always happens, but then we end up with more questions still to ask at the end. But I want to say thanks for coming on the show and introducing some of our audience to this idea of collegiate level education as an option to get into the field. There's a lot of ways to find SPD. And as we talked about at the top of the show, there's a lot of way that SPDs tend to find us by accident. But I appreciate you giving some clarity on this one. If folks wanted to ask you some more, either about the program specifically or just about advice on how to get started in general, could I encourage them to find you on LinkedIn and get connected after the show?
Absolutely. And know that I want to answer questions and that I'm open to answering as many questions as you have. And maybe I'm, throwing myself out there, but at the same time, this is something I'm truly passionate about. And I'm passionate about not only SPD, but education in general and really finding resources that operate best for you. There's so many different things out there. So make sure that you find something that will help you.
Yeah, well said. Well, again, Veronica, thanks for joining us on the show today. Great job on the interview.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure to meet you, Veronica.
And that was Veronica Martinez, Sterile Processing Program Coordinator at Mountainland Technical College in Lehi, Utah, sharing some of her experiences with us leading what sounds to be a pretty high-functioning sterile processing program out there, Jason. Really good interview to reflect on as we're thinking about, how to get more people exposed to this industry and how to help people have a good first year in sterile processing, because there are some folks that have bad experiences joining this industry. So,
oh, absolutely. I mean, I was thrown to the wolves in my world, so 9 years of sink or swim. But I appreciate what she said in that kind of middle of the interview, talking about make SPD yours, make it what you need it to be. Is it going to be a stepping stone into the next career? Is it going to be a stepping stone into leadership? I think as an industry, we struggle thinking that, if they're an SPD tech, they're always going to be an SPD tech. And so getting them to understand that this can be a stepping stone, but if you're going to be a permanent addition into the SPD world, there's leadership pieces that come into it, but also it's, having that lifelong learning aspect that she talked about and really pursuing those interests. And I think that's just key that, again, we struggle with, they have to be SPD because they're in SPD, they're learning. And I think that would probably be a little bit of angst as well when you're having somebody in a collegiate program. So it was really nice to hear that you're not tied to it.
Yeah, for sure. And, learning sterile processing is something that has evolved, is evolving. Jason, here in Kentucky, there still is not a state requirement for certification for sterile processing, which is wild. You've got to have a certificate to cut hair in Kentucky, because they want to make sure you know how to disinfect clippers, but not one to sterilize surgical instruments. It's like, what are we doing? But as that is continuing to be adopted across the United States, it makes me wonder if there is a day in the future where sterile processing will become that associate's level degree, as we've seen kind of a similar transformation happen in the OR with surgical techs, right? And so makes me wonder if that is in the future for sterile processing. But I guess we've got to walk and crawl before we walk before we run, work on trying to get people certified and trained well, and then we'll see what the future holds for us.
Completely agree, Bobby. It's going to start with the learning to walk first, getting the certifications, showing the value of SPD before we're going to actually be able to then require those additional pieces at the state level and at every state level.
Yeah.
And when that happens, then you'll actually see improvement in, we'll say, salary ranges as well, right?
Yeah. Well, that would be one hopeful outcome. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. We've got a lot more coming on building sterile processing technicians and focusing in on training this season. But until we talk to you again next time, on behalf of Jason, myself, and the rest of the team over here at Beyond Clean, keep fighting dirty.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app, or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.